Welcome, film buffs, music buffs, TV buffs, all buffs, where we can all get buffed. Welcome to episode 1 of Buffed. Today's body of work that we'll be looking at, people, is Call Me By Your Name. I was not sure which movie I wanted to start this podcast with. I was like, did I do the movie that inspired the podcast or my most recent watch? But then I was like, no. We're gonna go to the movie that started everything film related with me, and that is Call Me By Your Name. This movie altered my brain chemistry, not even in like a haha funny way, in a very much real way. So I'll introduce the podcast more and the vision or whatever, but I want to first talk about Call Me By Your Name. Okay, so this movie, first of all, it just takes my breath away every time I watch it. But how it altered me as a person, I remember after watching Call Me By Your Name, while I was watching it, the cinematography took me by storm. It made me want to get into film in a way that I didn't know I cared for film. I always watched movies. I've loved watching movies since I was very young, but I didn't know this movie could really make me want to dive into the world of film and television and see it with my future and things like this. I never took it. I never knew. This movie really brought out the cinephile in me, if you will, and it led to a whole other trickle of events that happened. One of them being once I was okay, I need to work in cinematography, and if I didn't get into wanting to work with cinematography, I wouldn't have wanted to end up fully being a writer. I wouldn't have ended up wanting to understand music more deeply, because after I watched it, I also started listening to different kinds of music. It was my first queer movie that I'd ever seen, ever. I grew up religious, obviously. So, first queer movie I ever watched. The soundtrack changed me. I started listening to Sufjan and just more classical music. I started watching more foreign and international films, which I'd never done at that time for some reason. I started watching so much Italian films, and the older ones, especially French films, and I started learning Italian. After this movie, I literally started learning Italian, which is insane, but it meant so much to me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how much this movie meant. There are so many scenes that are ingrained into my head. Now, this is episode 1, so if things are a bit sloppy, hey ho. But with a few things that stood out to me was there's a scene where Armie Hammer's character Oliver, he walks down the stairs when he moves into the house, and he touches it, the architecture. He takes a moment to literally feel it, and I don't know why it stuck with me and it stood out to me. I think because the film is just so beautiful, it was nice to see it get acknowledged inside the film as well. Every scene with the parents is beautiful, just beyond measurable. And then there is the scene where they are intimate, and it's probably one of my favorite scenes in a movie with intimacy, because I'm not against sexual things in movies at all. I just I don't prefer it, and that's okay. But what I loved about Call Me By Your Name, and this is where things feel a bit, I hate to bring down another man, but I'm going to. Well, do I? But in comparison to Sam Levinson's type of explicit nudity. Look, I don't mind nudity, just make it be useful in the project as well, which is what I don't get when it comes to making scripts and stuff. We all understand, like, if you're writing a script, you understand that things must have a reason for being there and have a place, and same thing with adding sexual scenes. It should serve a purpose to the film, right? And when it comes to Sam Levinson, a lot of the time I don't think he thinks of it as serving a purpose, rather than it just being something he puts in there. I don't know the guy, let me not go into that. But with that scene, the sexual scenes in Call Me By Your Name, what I really loved, it like they show a few moments where it's like they're kissing or whatever, and then the camera pans out and it goes to like the outside. It shows you the windows outside. It gives the couple, it gives them in this movie the space they need to be intimate. Because that's the thing about, sometimes that breaks my brain when I watch intimate scenes. I love when I feel like I don't like feeling like I shouldn't be watching. Like, I don't like feeling like, oh, I shouldn't be here. This is like their moment, So I loved that idea of letting the camera pan out to look at the window outside and the scenery outside, which is gorgeous, and kind of giving them that privacy. I don't know. Look, I don't have a problem with coitus in films. I think about Sex and the City, a show that I've been watching and loving, and it's purposeful. It's purposeful in there. It adds to it, but when you can see it's just thrown in loosely in a project because, oh, of course we need to throw in sex, then it's not purposeful and you can see it. That's my problem with it, but I won't get into that right now. But yeah, those are just a couple standouts. Obviously, like I said, every scene with his parents is just beautiful. Okay, I'm lying. My favorite was when when Elio was with his mom and dad. They were sat in the living room, I think, and they were reading, and the mom was reading like a book or something. It just, I just love his parents so much. I truly, before I knew the journey I was about to embark on, I didn't know Call Me By Your Name would be the movie to start this for me, but it started so much for me. And when I look back at where I am now and how this movie really felt like, I know it's weird to have a pinpoint to be like, oh, this movie started a lot of things for me. It really did. It really did. And it's had a very long lasting impact on me. And there's a specific after watching it, I started going for Italian summer playlists on YouTube. You just had to be there. And I remember there was this picture, maybe I'll insert it on YouTube, of Haribo gummies, and I looked up the Call Me By Your Name, the Walkman that he was using, the Sony Walkman, and there was this one picture, and I finally found it again recently on Pinterest. I searched for it, I hunted for it, and I found it, and it feels so special to me. To this day, I remember that picture because I saw it back then, and I remembered it now, and I found it. And it's saved on my favorites on my phone because it just means that much to me. It's ridiculous. I remember at the time, right, in South Africa, they didn't have those Haribo gummies that were in that picture. I just associated so much, everything with this movie, but there were these Haribo gummies, those peach ones, and the peach. How could I forget the peach scene? Oh my gosh, the jokes that came with it. Crazy. But the Haribo gummies, I ended up getting them recently because at the time they didn't have them here, and I found them by luck. I just was searching for sweets for my niece, and then I ended up seeing them, and I was like, oh, I'm taking these home. I took pictures of those as well. They're in my gallery because I like, how do I explain this movie? It means so much. It's crazy. The cinematography, it's like my eyes opened for the first time. That's how this movie made me feel. It's like it opened my eyes for the first time. I'd watched movies before, but never had I seen a movie like this. Like, I became so in love with cinematography from that point on. It's just, I don't know, it left me breathless. And it didn't leave me queer. Other things did that. But there's obviously something that we need to discuss when it comes to Call Me By Your Name, and that's the age gap debate. I love this movie a lot. But there are things that maybe the biggest critique I hear with this movie is the age gap and people not being able to like get over it, and that's fair. I don't know. Now this is up for discussion or debate. I feel like the purpose of having this age gap also serves to show, what's that thing that they say? What's that saying? It's like a warning almost. Because who suffers the most in this movie? Throughout the entire movie, Oliver gets to make Elio lose his mind, and he gets to take advantage of him and all these things. And yes, it is glamorized to some extent in the sense of like the parents never condone it or whatever. You could blame that on the time period, I don't know, whatever. But I will say that, I mean, even if you blame it on the time period, it doesn't make it okay. But what I'm saying is, I never watched it even back then when I was much younger. I never watched it and thought, now I'm gonna go date an older man. Now I'm gonna go date someone and have a huge age gap between us, and and have a power imbalance, which you can clearly see the power dynamics with Elio and Oliver. Elio literally is like constantly waiting for him. Elio is constantly in pain for Oliver, and it's devastating to watch when you know like it's gonna fail. Elio's gonna end up being hurt, and he is. And I love that final scene where we just watch him cry, where we literally just watch him cry and see, even with how time had passed, he was still affected. And Oliver moves on, and he's marrying someone. It meant nothing to him. It was just another, you know what I mean? I never watched it and thought, yes, this is glamorized. I can see why it would feel that way, because the love is so big and so aspirational, in the sense that the love itself, you know, it's in Italy, it's like, it's not France, but it's still the romantic language, and its setting and all of that makes it so like aspirational in the sense of romance. But their love, quote unquote love, it's not aspirational at all. It's messy. He's unreliable. Elio's been taken advantage of. Okay, so I never felt like it condoned it, but I can see why some people might feel that way and might not be able to watch this movie for that reason. Very much justified, but that's how I saw it. That's how I took it. That's my take. Maybe it's a hot take, I don't know. Really love it. I think, okay, so this is funny. I didn't even tell you what the movie's about. So basically, if you haven't watched Call Me By Your Name, well, here's the thing. That's the concept of this podcast, but I'll get to that. Basically, this movie is a romance of the sort, a bit of a coming of age in ways, or coming of sexuality. We have Elio. He is a teenager, and he explores his sexual orientation / identity through once he meets a guy. This guy's Oliver. He's much older, and Oliver, lives with Elio during the summer because he is working on a manuscript with Elio's father, who is what is he to Oliver? But basically, Elio's father invites Oliver to work on like the manuscript and see what he does and all of that. Blah blah blah. What takes up the entire summer? It's kind of like an enemies to lovers, because Elio and Oliver don't get along at the beginning, but as Elio falls for him, and only Elio does the falling, it becomes this romance, and we see how that looks, and it's also an exploration of his queerness as well. So it's got the most beautiful scenes. It's tragic, but yeah, that's basically the premise, and it's a very simple premise, and that's why I loved Italian films. That's why I love them. That's why I loved watching them at the beginning, is because how simple they are. There's this other one, also French films. There's this one called L'ami de mon ami, and there's this other one called that one with the curly hair. I remember the audio from that one went viral. The one where he's got a bunch of like girls and he's waiting for this girlfriend of his to come. You know the one, right? I don't remember the name. But they just all, even if they, I just love how they focus on human interactions and the human. I have a fascination with human psyche, and I love when a film is grounded and it focuses more on realism. Love it. Eat it up. And that genre of Italian films and French films, not just like even God's Own Country. Guys, really great films here. This is my kind of film. I love it so much. But yeah, something else with gosh, now that I think about it, Luca Guadagnino, the director, really has been taking the world by storm with his use of relationships and sexual exploration. Like the way he portrays and uses sex in a film is so intentional, and I love that. Same thing with challenges, queer, all these things. It's just so cool to see. It's so cool to see. Sam Levinson should take notes. As for another thing I really love about the watching his films, specifically Call Me By Your Name, outstanding work with cinematography, is it just feels so fresh. Man, you just open your eyes when you watch these films. It's so cool. Something else that I really, really loved and I mentioned was the soundtrack. At the time, I wasn't listening to much music. I don't know where I was for most of my life. I was living under a rock, quite literally. And then when I heard this movie's soundtrack, wow. It opened my ears as well. Not only were my eyes open for the first time, but my ears were open too. It's really, really cool. The soundtrack is so perfect. It's so perfect. It's perfect. I even started listening to Italian music. Like I said, I started listening to all sorts of languages of music. French, Spanish. I started listening to to say a movie really impacted me like this, like I don't have the words to explain it. I don't have the memory to explain it. It just changed me. It changed how I view peaches. It changed it changed everything. Oh my gosh. And then on TikTok, when Elio dancing that you know that sound by Melanie Martinez, and it was you just had to be there. I really love this movie. It had such an impact on the internet as well. Like I said, like you could not escape Italian summer. You could not escape it. Like Pinterest, YouTube, the playlists that were made, the TikToks, just everything like took everyone by storm. It's amazing. Um, I really, really, really highly recommend this movie if you love watching things that are fresh to the eyes. Like, you'll enjoy the cinematography, but also just it's an enjoyable movie. The only reason why you might struggle with it, I think, would be the age gap. So if that's like something that's hard, skip out on it. But some of the scenes in here are embarrassing to watch. Like, I remember some parts I had to skip through. Okay, one thing about me is I'm always gonna watch a movie with the remote in my hand because I get secondhand embarrassment and I have to skip parts because I'm anticipating something shady is gonna happen. I did that with that scene of them kissing at that spot that Elio showed him with the water there. And I skipped that scene for many years. Every time I watched it, I just ignored it. I skipped through it because I was like, something awkward's gonna happen. The first time they kiss, I believe, and then it did. I saw a clip on TikTok of what he does to Oliver in that scene. So yeah, I'm glad I skipped that part usually, but alas, I found out what goes on. My mind is just too genius, too smart. But yeah, that's me ranting. So let's somewhat get into the premise of my podcast and what I want to do with it. Gonna keep the discussion a bit short for this episode, seeing as it's the first one. But for this, I was hoping to kind of make a place where we can just geek out over films, projects. I call it bodies of work because it's like a workout themed thing for some reason, and because it's buffed, we get buffed. Where we talk about projects, like we're gonna look at more deep dives and things like that in future with albums, with just any music, art, movies. The main thing is movies, TV, like television shows and series, and what's the other one? Now I just forgot. I've lost track of thought. But yeah, basically I'm just gonna be reviewing and talking about it because what inspired me, and I'll get to the movie that inspired this podcast. Every time I end up going to Letterboxd, I wanna write a review, but it's just there aren't enough words to capture what I'm feeling after I watch something, especially if it's really good. So I just wanted a space where I can really talk about something more. Basically just a safe space to geek out, and think of it as Letterboxd Live. That's pretty much what it is. And I just want to focus on really good films that I loved. I mean, if I didn't love it, I'll still review it maybe, but I really want to focus on more things I love. And I also have an on repeat section and a watch list where I talk about things that I want to watch in future, that are on my watch list, what I'm thinking about it, and also music that I'm listening to currently and that I'm loving and all of that. But we will get into all of that in the upcoming episodes. This is just a welcome to my podcast. Okay, welcome to BUFFD. Thank you guys so much for being here, and until episode 2.